some of that right here. So this session is going to be a little bit different than the previous sessions because Eve has made an incredible video for us showing us how to make harissa tear share bread. So what we're going to hop into right away watching the video, and then we're going to have a conversation with Eve where she's going to share with us about her experiences and we'll ask her questions. And for this session, we have a little bit of a tighter time than the previous one. So we're going to finish this the latest at 1 p.m. So thank you, everyone. And I'm going to share with y'all the video. Hopefully everything will go great. Okay, everyone ready? Sorry. 1 moment, please. That worked a second ago.
That's always how it is, Tom.
I know, right? Okay. Here it is. Okay, can everyone see? Yeah, everyone's hearing all right, seeing all right? We're starting.
Hello, thank you so much for coming to my kitchen. I'm Eve. Welcome. Today I'm going to make harissa tear and share bread. Let's get the oven set to 425. Let's get all the ingredients out and at room temperature and make sure my pizza dough is ready and we can get started. Okay, so tear and share bread is just reimagining pizza. And like anything else with a flatbread and yummy cheese, you can use a variety of different sauces in it. Sometimes I use pesto, and it's super delicious. But for today, we're going to use a wet harissa. Harissa is Moroccan, and it comes as a dried powder. It's a combination like chili or curry or ras al hanout or za'atar. And today's one I purchased. It comes in mild and in spicy, kosher, and it is super easy and convenient. Today's recipe is all about simple things you can do. So we're gonna grab pizza dough I made, but you can get your own from the supermarket. I'd recommend the deli to pick up pizza if it's a supermarket that makes pizzas, or your local pizza shop. But here is my pizza dough. I've made a double batch. We'll punch it down, use half of it, and roll it out so that I have this whole rectangle of a cutting board filled with the pizza so that I can put all my toppings on it, roll it up, cut it into a cool design, throw it in the oven, and it's going to come out like a wreath so that people can actually tear and share the breads that we're going to make today. It's great for dinner, can be hot out of the oven or served room temperature, yummy with a salad. But it's also really good for those times when you're entertaining because you could put out several and have people enjoy both the display and the deliciousness. So let's get this onto the board and roll it out. Okay, so we're going to put a little bit of flour on our board. Get that nice and rolled out, and also make sure that you flour your rolling pin. I have a couple different pins, but this one's super good for pizza dough because pizza dough's actually a pretty gentle dough. Doesn't need anything super heavy like a marble rolling pin. So grabbing my pizza dough, ooh, and an Eve secret surprise here. I'm not a huge fan of plastic, but if I'm going to use it so that, for example, my dough could rise for, it took about 90 minutes, when I'm in hotels and they have all of those shower caps, I make sure to grab them so that they're not made and then thrown away. Since they're already in my room, I grab them, and when I need them, that's what I use on the top of my bowls. The elastic makes it great to hold on. You can actually wash and reuse them many times, and it keeps my plastic use down. So just a trick. Anyway, grab half of the pizza dough if you've made your own, and if you've bought it in a store, it's going to be ready in already in a round piece like this. That's enough for one pizza. So grab that, give it some flour. See, it's nice and delicate when you make it yourself. But also easy to pick up. And that's going to take over this entire space here on my cutting board. So roll it out nice and gently. And for this one, I'm going to want it to be the full rectangle because I'm going to need to fill it and then cut it. So we're going to roll it out here. And then I'm going to use wet toppings. You can put dry toppings too if you want. Sometimes I use sun-dried tomatoes or onions, whatever you think would be nice in a small individual serving when you cut it up. And you can also use a variety of cheeses, whatever you think is good and melty and you have in the house. For this one, I'm playing with a number of different flavors. I have some feta and some mozzarella and some Parmesan. And we'll just kind of play with the quantities till it looks great, but you could use a whole variety of cheeses as well. So let's see, we're just about rolled out here. Let's get it all the way to the edge, and I'll show you another trick about pizza, which is that I tuck it under the corners of my cutting board. And I do that so that as it gets a second to rest, it doesn't retract all the way up on the top. So let me finish that off and I'll show you that. Okay, look, here is a pizza dough on a cutting board. See, I can take the edges and just lay them underneath the four corners, nice and gently. We don't need to pull this and have very thin areas in any parts of it. So just nice and gently. And then when I lay it down, it'll hold under all of those. The next step is I'm going to take the harissa here and put it on the crust. And so, where's the spoon? I don't have a spoon. Okay, we'll just use this. Again, this one's a mild. You can use much spicier ones. And what's great about harissa is that it is made out of peppers as opposed to tomatoes. So this is going to be a familiar look to a pizza, but it's actually going to taste quite different, which is always a nice fun surprise. Many years ago, I ran a pizza shop. I know that is very hard to believe about me, but true. It was called Bella Luna. It was in Hershey, and it was a pleasure. And we had a brick oven and did a lot of fire roasting. And so I've spent a lot of time around pizza, even though I was not the head cook. But it was a lot of fun to come up with lots of creations. So here is the harissa all spread out on top of my dough. And then on top of that, I'm going to put several cheeses. So let's start with this. This is feta. We're just going to put that right around here on top. Yum. Sometimes when people cook with a wet harissa like this, they really like using a goat's cheese. You might see lovely recipes with it because you want some creaminess against the spice if you're going to go pretty spicy. The one I've chosen today is mild, but you can kick this up quite a lot if you would like. All right, so I have some feta all over this here. So far, looks pretty good. Now I'm going to add more cheese. Oh, that was about half a cup. Here is closer to 1.5 cups of mozzarella, which you can buy grated or grate your own. Just so you know, if you're buying it already grated, super convenient, it's going to work perfectly in a recipe like this. But because it has a non-caking agent in it, it's not going to work so well in other kinds of recipes, depending on what you're using the cheese for. So like if you're making a sauce, I would not recommend getting one that's already pre-shred. But for this, it's kind of made for pizza. It's going to be perfect. And then I'm going to put a little bit of Parmesan on this as well. All right. Okay, it's starting to look delicious. Let's put this all over here. Good, still looking kind of like pizza, right? You can see this? So now I'm going to take it and let go of the edges, and I'm going to roll it up. All right? See, let's just pick this up here, release those edges here, and let it go. And because I'm not all the way to the outside edges, sometimes when I make this, I trim the edge. You can also try to get all the way to the seams, but let's first see how it goes. So now we're going to take this, and we could, for example, if this was a pesto one, we could put lots of basil in it, for example, to make it a fresh herb taste. But for the cerise one, let's just make a gentle edge over here so that when we roll it, it doesn't all come out onto our hands, and we can give it lots of rolls. You're just basically making a snake here. Very simple. And because we floured the cutting board good enough, it's all just rolling straight off and not sticking anywhere. Okay. Now you can see that it is a full snake with a seam on the bottom, right? This is gonna be amazing. Okay, I like making sure that it's all about the same width all the way through. So squeeze it to your heart's content. And then I'm gonna just pinch these two edges right here nice and tight. And I'm gonna use my kitchen shears and cut that edge off. Boop, boop. Don't throw it away. You can always do cool little garlic balls, knots, something sweet with pizza dough, so a lot of options. But now we have this nice shape. All right, then I'm going to oil it and put it into a pan. I'm also gonna put some olive oil in the pan. So check this out. Just put some right in here. You can use a cloth if you want to make sure that you get this oil everywhere, because you really don't want your tear and share bread to stick. I'm going to use my hands because I'm going to use my hands to oil the tear and share bread as well. And I know some people use sprays to be able to spray their baking things so that nothing sticks. If that's your preference, that's fine. I just like using olive oil for this one because I want that taste in my tear and share bread. And the pizza dough that I make is not super oily. It's not been sitting in oil, for example. Now it will. It's going to get a nice dose here of some oil on all of it. This will help to ensure that it doesn't stick anywhere. And then I'm going to use a little bit here of an egg wash to seam that edge. It just helps keep it all attached. And when we're done, we can put a little bit of egg wash on the top of it to make it a beautiful color as well. All right, there we go. Now it's coming in the pan. I want to check to see how we've done in terms of size. So I'm grabbing it gently but not having too much weight anywhere, and I'm going to lay it inside my pan. You see that? So now it's inside here. Where there was the seam here, I'm not going to worry about it too much yet because I'm going to use those kitchen shears again. I'm just going to flip this right over and use a clean surface. I'm going to use the kitchen shears again to cut into it, which makes it a little bit larger, and the two ends will connect just fine. So you see now how it is? Great. So now we take this, and I'm going to cut, let me see if you can see this. I'm going to cut about 3 of my fingers in length between each one of them, but not cutting all the way through. Can you see that where my thumb is holding back from where my shears are going to cut? Now I'm going to do that again. About 3 of my fingers in width and not all the way through to the end. We're going to do that all the way around what I've just made. I'll show you that when I come back. Okay, can you see here? I have been cutting all the way around, and now I'm going to take egg wash and just paint on the tops of all these surfaces so that some herbs and spices that I want to put on top will stick better, and so this will brown up beautifully. Simple, easy. We're just making a funky stuffed looking pizza. All right, now it's got egg wash all over it. Let's put some spices and herbs on it. Today I've grabbed some savory, some red pepper flakes, a little bit of parsley for color, and because I like a little bit of a health kick, I'm putting some flax, chia, and hemp seeds on top. So here we go. Let's just take some of this parsley and sprinkle it over the tops. I use lots of different things when I use the pestos or other kinds of sauces, and I'm sure you can come up with yummy sauces and herb combinations too. And here is a little bit, ooh, I have oily hands. Here is a little bit of red pepper flakes. Remember, I used mild harissa, so this won't be very spicy. And a little bit of savory, imagine you'd also might use a different kind of herb. Sage, maybe? Might be nice on top here. Rosemary could be great with the cheeses. So many options. And a little bit here of some seeds. Oh, this is looking amazing. Okay, I'm so hungry for this. I'll show you what this looks like. Can you see now? All right, the next thing we're going to do is take each one of these pieces and I'm going to turn it slightly so that it is sitting up. Just a little, just on its side. Sometimes when I do this, I make half of it go one way and half of it go another way. Sometimes I do it all in the same direction. This is really up to you. But just a nice, easy twist, almost as if you're like putting them to bed. Twist them each down, making a pinwheel, making a sunflower. So see, it's now looking like this. I'm going to stick this in the oven at 425 for about 18-22 minutes and check it, and I'll show you it when it's done. And here's the harissa tear and share bread fresh out of the oven. If we go into detail here, you can see where I made those cuts because the harissa is peeking through. And then the golden crust on top that was egg washed is still holding all of its herbs and spices and seeds. It's hard to gauge, but each individual section here is about 2.5–3 inches wide and very full and thick. So a yummy portion. And you can see how many portions you have when you have an entire tear and share bread. It would be great to serve this with soups, salads, maybe crudité, and definitely a dessert or two. Especially if this is for Shavuot. People tend to think of cheesecake for Shavuot, and that's great. But there are so many other decadent and delicious dairy items you could have on the menu. And I hope you'll consider harissa tear and share bread as one of the options for your home. Thanks for cooking harissa tear and share bread with me today. If these are the kinds of videos you love, I hope you'll check out Pearlstone Online. Our instructors and educators have been making dozens and dozens now of videos for you. And if you like food half as much as I do, I hope you'll also go check out Pearlstone Kitchen. Our chefs are cooking meals that are being delivered in our communities and are fresh, farm to table, delicious and healthy. We're also providing those meals to some of the local hospitals with our Healthcare Heroes donation meals opportunity. If you feel like donating, check that out as well and help us feed the front line. Thank you. See you soon.
Wow. Thank you. I'm so hungry right now. I almost took my hand into the screen and tried to get one. Okay. Thank you, Eve. That is a beautiful video.
You're very welcome. Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to have you here. I just got a tear and share bread out of the oven, and I thought I would take it out of its pan while we go through some question and answer portion of this so you could see one as it comes out.
Oh, that's even
The one I
nicer.
made today, can you guys see this one? This one is a pesto and Asiago cheese and sun-dried tomato tear and share bread that I've made just so that we could have one around while we're talking. And I'm happy to answer lots of questions. Tone, do you have some for me?
Yeah. My first question is, you mentioned in the video that you ran a pizza shop. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So
And
I
how-
worked for Hershey Entertainment and Resorts for many years in food operation. I ran lots and lots of different food locations for them. Sometimes all of the VIP floor of the Giant Center, all of the VIP foods for stadiums and star pavilions for all of the concerts, and lots of restaurants, a steakhouse, several coffee shops, family service meals, and Bella Luna, which was a brick oven pizza location. It was so much fun to have a brick oven pizza establishment because you get to know your families and your guests in a different way. And you get really, really familiar with your product because you use the same ingredients over and over again in totally different and fun and unexpected ways. We really liked to use the pizza materials and create all sorts of fun pizzas. So for a while, we would make more traditional pizzas, but we would put salads on top of them, and people were really interested in having it as their flatbread options. We also made lots of Italian foods and had an Italian dry goods market in our store. So I'm familiar with some of the Italian import foods that I use in some of my tear and share breads these days. It was a lot of fun to be at Bella Luna.
We have a practical question from the Facebook comments. Someone is asking, can this go in a pizza oven or is it too thick?
So its thickness is completely up to you. In a pizza oven, you can make it much, much longer, like a stromboli or calzone kind of concept, which are also pizza dough based stuffed breads. So you could have something much longer in that way and make it a more traditional stuffed bread and then have a much flatter wreath. This one that I have here today, can you see that it is, we're talking about this thick all the way through. So it's got a lot of height on it, and I'm not sure in an at-home capacity that would fit into one, but in a commercial, like brick oven one, absolutely you could put it in, for sure. You should know the temperature change though. This one I do at 425 at home. Brick oven pizzas, you have to know the temperatures. They're very different when you're all the way back by the wood versus all the way close to the window. So just make sure you know your temperature.
There's another question in the chat. What do you do if you don't have a bunt-like pan?
So you can create a braid. You could create a stuffed bread that looks more like a calzone and use one of your sheet pans, and it will cook as well. You do not need to do this. I have done it in many different shapes and directions. Even something that looks more like babka, you could use and twist it, and it would be a perfect way to do it.
Great. Yay, resourcefulness. I wanted to share, Eve wrote the recipe and the ingredients, and I had a question about the ingredients, so I'm going to share with everyone. So these are the ingredients for your harissa tear and share bread. Where do you source these ingredients?
Oh, great question. So what I can get from my own garden, like my herbs, here I grabbed some from my garden this morning. Here is some fresh oregano, and here is some fresh basil. I would definitely go with fresh or the dried ingredients from my own garden. I love being able to grow my own. Some of the other things that I use, like this harissa, for example, is available in supermarkets in our area. You would be able to source it. You can also get it online. And you can make your own harissa if you don't find a wet version. There are lots of companies that make dry versions of harissas. It's a blend of many different things. It comes somewhere from Morocco, North Africa, and you could create your own. It's chilies, smoked paprika, cumin, fennel, garlic, coriander. It's a whole nice blend, but you could use olive oil and some roasted red peppers and make your own wet sauce. And then for some of the other ingredients, like the cheeses, for example, there are some Italian stores that I like to check and see what the hechsheres are within their stores, but Di Pasquale's downtown in Baltimore City is a great location to get real authentic Italian imports, especially, for example, if you don't want to use a different flour when you're making the dough yourself, because they have 00 grade flour, which is what we use in commercial pizzas.
Oh, yeah.
Some other things you should know, like other spices. I'm a big fan of Sadaf spice mix. It's kosher and halal. It's available at H Mart. So the one in Catonsville is where I usually go and stock up. But they have lots and lots of different spices that if I'm going to be sourcing them, I would go and get them. And I think it's called Mount Vernon Marketplace. I don't know if it still does, but it used to have a spice dealer right in the market, and you could get and order spices and spice combinations from her.
And can you make this vegan? Like for
Yeah, of
those of us
course.
who don't eat cheese.
Of course. So in Shavuot, I think about dairy is the direction we're going. And I am not a huge fan of vegan cheese as a substitute for either goat or sheep or cow-based milks. So instead, I would use nutritional yeast, which has a cheesy-like flavor, and do something like caramelized onions and figs folded in, and then use nutritional yeast to give it that nice cheesy flavor, but still stay vegan. The recipe would be the same.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So good. Would you tell us a little bit about the directions? Like, how did you find this recipe? What made you make these breads?
When Do What Ima Says was doing a lot more catering, this was one of the things I wrote and put the recipe together myself so that I could make many of them, 8 or so, for a big catering event and have them out on a buffet. The wreath is really pretty for presentation, and depending on the group, I would cut the individual pieces and have those below it and available so people could just grab and go. And it makes for an unusual component towards a larger buffet or a larger meal. It also can be eaten room temperature, which is one of the things I like to look at. I care a lot about safe food handling. I want to make sure that everything's in the temperature it needs to be. And stuffed bread can be served room temperature. So I could make it ahead and serve it in volume.
That sounds so fun and easy, the way you describe it anyways. Great. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about different kinds of tear and share breads?
Sure.
I have some pictures you sent me.
Okay, bring some up. So here are other tear and share breads I've made. They're all in wreath form, but you can certainly modify it. This one makes it easy for you to see how I've cut those individual cuts into it, each one of them being a tear and share itself. This one is roasted peppers and herb parmesan, and you'll see I sprinkled the top of this with several different herbs as well. But you'll be able to see the roasted peppers going throughout that one. So that's a fun way to connect with maybe something else in the menu so that you've built a menu where the foods get to talk to each other. What else do you have? So this is a catering event. That's sun-dried tomatoes and pesto, kind of like the one I made today, but because I was serving that one in large volume, it has less spices on top. And I like to source sun-dried tomatoes that are dried without there being anything else in them, like sulfites, that could give people headaches. So if you're going to use a dried fruit or vegetable, you certainly want to get that great flavor and color, like the tomatoes you can see peeking out through this one. But you also want to check the ingredients and know what you're feeding people. A lot of the way in which I nourish people is by making sure my ingredients will make them feel good, not just feel full. And I whisper prayers into each one of my bakings.
Oh, wow. That's a really interesting ceremony. Would you tell us more about that?
Yeah, of course. I bet many people on this call do too. Whenever I make tea or dinner or something like today's tear and share bread, while I'm rolling it up and baking it, I think of who's going to be able to eat it and how it could nourish not just their bodies, but their souls. And I think of ways to whisper into the bread my hopes for them, my health for them, my wishes for them to be either healing or continuing in a time of real plentiness and bountiful existence. And I whisper their names and good wishes into all of my food. And so sometimes when people eat my food, they say, wow, this feels like it was really made with love. And I giggle because it was.
Oh, that is the secret ingredient you're saying. Okay. And this is the last picture I've got.
Okay, so this one alternates. This is a little bit of a different technique you have to make because you have to know as you're rolling it up what sauces are going to be on which ones. But if you can see, this alternates from a green basil pesto to a red tomato sauce so that each individual one will be one or the other. This is great when I'm serving families or just get-togethers with friends because as everybody pulls them, they alternate in color and people get to discuss the different tastes. I warn you, when you make it like this, it goes really quickly because everybody wants to try both. So you might need to make two.
I mean, if it's so tasty, of course you want more than one. Yeah, and do you want to share what you have with you right now? Is it different than what you showed us so far?
Oh, sure. So every time I make them, I look at what's fresh, what's seasonal. I try to really stay focused on what's available, what's growing in my garden. So they differ, and I think that's really important. Because we're going into Shavuot, I'm really thinking about spring. I'm really focused on milk products for this Chag. So this has 3 different cheeses in it: mozzarella, Parmesan, and Asiago. I like the Asiago against basil pestos. Here is some basil pesto. So, ooh, I'm gonna just spill a little oil over so that you guys can see it. I grow a lot of basil, and it's really fun to make pestos. It is an easy thing to freeze and then unfreeze and use as you need. So this has lots of that from last year's harvest, but I also have some fresh basil in there as well because it's already coming up this spring. And it has in it a little bit of sun-dried tomatoes. Here you can see these. Let me see if I get them up close. You can see what a beautiful color they are. They are, you see them?
Wow. Yeah,
They still have all of the tomato. You can see them through. And then it has several cheeses in it as well. So let me pick up, if I pick up a piece of this here, let me rip off some and bring it up for you. You can see what it looks like in the middle, what it looks like in each of those individual layers. Yeah. That's what I made for my family today.
What does it smell like so we can feel like we're with you?
You know how cut grass has a real particular scent?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you bake pesto, it has a similar kind of herbal and green kind of smell to it. And anytime I bake carbohydrates with cheese, there is some inherent comfort food association, so it smells like home.
Does sound really good. Why do you think cheese is such a central thing in Shavuot?
Oh, there's a number of different reasons, and I'm happy to hear from other people on this call as well why we focus on dairy. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's a land filled with milk and honey. Of course, the word for milk has to do with that 40 number. I'm sure you all are all familiar with the 40 days Moses was on top of the hill and how long it takes. So we use that in terms of gematria in our cooking for every holiday. But I'm a real farm-to-table person in terms of the way in which I experience all of the holidays. So for example, in my home, all of the foods we make for Sukkot are the bounty of the fall harvest and will be fall foods. So fall pumpkins and squashes will be really prevalent. This is a spring holiday, and spring is a time when all those babies would have been born on the farms, goats and sheep and cows, which means that the community has lots of milk. And so it's a really good opportunity to use that milk in our cooking, in the way in which we celebrate our holiday, and to bring some of the land into our meals.
Yeah, so we've talked through the sojourn with farmers and growers and people who have a lot of knowledge about wheat, and you're on the other end, you're on the receiving end. And so can you tell us about about the receiving end from the farmers, that perspective?
Sure. Every time somebody goes into a supermarket and they pick up a pineapple, they're experiencing the opportunity to be super close to something that is the wrong season and very far away. I live in a different world than picking up the pineapple. I live in a world where I want to know my local farmers. I want to know what's being grown right here. For example, I want my honey to be local so that my family is benefiting from eating that tiny amount of pollen that is right here in our neighborhoods to help them be able to ingest a little and be less affected by it if they had allergies. So food is really both medicine and attention to the local farmer. And I try very hard to source the foods that we have, not just for Shavuot, but in my home all the time, from my local community if I'm not growing it myself out in my own garden. Right now I have squash, no, not yet. Squash is gonna be planted soon. I have tomatoes out, I have cabbage, I have kale, I have broccolini, and my potatoes are already out and growing. And I'll certainly use a lot of my own food in my own cooking, but I think it's really important for our health, for our earth, and the awareness, like we say a bracha before we eat and give attention to the moment of eating. We also are intentional with our purchasing and the foods we use to keep it local.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a farmer as well, so I really understand that aspect. Would you agree with me if I said that eating food fresh from the ground is like 10 times healthier, tastier? It gives like more volume to the food when you cook it?
I would definitely agree with that. And if for people who are interested in eating some of the food off of Pearlstone's land, there's 2 different ways that they can get that right now. Pearlstone Kitchen is taking some of the ingredients from our farms to people's tables by producing meals that include food that's come right off of our farms and is in season right now. So it's about to be strawberry season, and strawberries are going to be incorporated in those meals that get delivered. Those are also the meals we take to the 2 local hospitals so that our healthcare heroes are getting food straight off of the farms at Pearlstone. And Chesapeake Farm to Table is a cooperative like going to a farmer's market where you can order food straight from Pearlstone and other local farmers and have it delivered like a CSA. And I would encourage everybody on the call to consider ways that they're sourcing their food and also thanking our local farmers.
Oh yeah, they are heroes at this time, that's for sure. Okay, I have one last question. And then if more people have questions, please, after this, you can unmute yourself and ask. Or Eve, if you want to share anything, please. Would you share, you talked a little bit about this in the video, but more about like pairing, like how do you know what kind of bread to put in what meal, or what produce would go best together?
Sure. So the art of building menus is certainly fun, and you've all been to restaurants and family members' homes where they get it spot on, and you can tell because it feels like the food is singing with itself and not in conflict. Some of that has to do with using a few of the same ingredients and more than one of the items you're preparing so that there's some connection. So for example, if I was starting off a meal with something really briny, like making pickles or olives, I might look at where else I could use vinegars in maybe the way I was brightening up a salad to go with it so that they were talking to each other. And I would be very careful with a couple things not to clash with each other when pairing foods or pairing foods with alcohol. So for example, if I was going to do something with a very, very big spicy kick to it, I would make sure there weren't many other things that also had the same level of spiciness, but I would need some blends so that there was a way to balance the meal. And so when I was thinking about the tear and share bread, it's a rich, heavy calorie carb portion of the meal. And I wouldn't want it to be the entire meal that people eat. It doesn't have enough of that nutrient-dense foods that something like roasted vegetables or salads would have. I have a recipe and a video up that you can check out if you want online where I made fiddlehead ferns and some asparagus and some other vegetables as a side dish because it's what's right in season right now. I might go with something like that so there was more nutrient-packed, vitamin-packed accompaniment to go with something this carb heavy, and make sure that there was a balance across the plate.
Wow, that's a talent. I just posted the link so people, if they want to see your videos, they can look into that. Thank you, Eve. So if anybody else in this conversation wants to ask questions, please unmute yourself and ask away.
Eve, I was thinking about how this week we spent a lot of time talking about ancient grains, and sort of like from the farmer aspect and the impact of growing ancient grains, whatever, on your land. And I was curious if you have any experience baking with any ancient grains like einkorn or emmer or like local milled flours or anything like that.
I have maybe less with baking, but certainly with salads. I have used several things in salads, unconventional ancient grains. and boil them or toss them, to toast them first and to have them open up and use them that way. I'm trying to figure out whether they count in your ancient grains list, but I use wheat berries all the time. Certainly quinoa is one that I would highly recommend because it's an ancient grain, but a great protein as well. Although we need to be really resourceful about where we're sourcing quinoa, because the industry of producing quinoa does sometimes deplete its resource from its local community. So I invite you to check that out and look at it. But I use them in lots of my other cooking. There are also, whenever you have the ability to look at ingredients for breads, for flours, I highly encourage that you look at the fiber to carbohydrate ratio. I think my standard is 5:1. I want it to be like 15 on the fiber side to 5 on the carb side when I'm looking at somebody else making my breads. And that's a good way of knowing that the whole grain was used in the production of that flour. So words like whole grain or multigrain are pretty useless. The proof is in the actual ingredients. And a good way of knowing that is how much the fiber level is up. Certainly you're gonna get a lot more fiber when you're using the whole kernel itself. So that's another thing I look for in breads if I'm not the one making them. And that might be a useful trick. Oh, and do you guys all know that you want as few ingredients in your bread as possible? If bread has 5 ingredients, you're good. You want it to have a flour, a yeast, salt, oil, and sugar, and maybe the water that you're using to get the little bit of sugar to have your yeast bloom. But that's your basic set of ingredients. When you're looking at many other things, emulsifiers, different kinds of fat content, added proteins in them, I'm always concerned with what else is in the breads. A trick in our house when we make our own breads, my husband bakes our bread every week, is that since he makes all of our yogurts, he uses the whey, which is the byproduct from making our yogurt, as the liquid in all our breads. And that increases our protein content, it increases the nutrient of my bread, and it uses up all the whey we're producing every week that I don't want to just throw out. So if you're a bread baker, I highly recommend you also become a yogurt maker because they have a good relationship back and forth. Other questions for me?
Eve, what's your favorite thing to make or bake?
Of anything?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a huge, huge question for me. I can tell you that I grew up in a multi-family unit home, kind of like a commune. So one of the things that feels very much to me like I have made a home and it is warm for all the people who live with me is that I bake off our granola at least once a week and fill jars of our granola. So it's not hard to make, and it's actually not something I eat very often, but I love making it because it's a tradition. And so that feels really good. The other thing I really like making is everybody for their special occasions gets to pick their own menus. And I love making it when people give me challenges and also are very transparent about their favorite food so that I can give them the gift they want rather than me pretending I know what everybody else wants to eat. So each of my family members, for example, has a special cake that on their birthdays they get made every year for them.
That's a lovely tradition. There's a question in the chat from Zoe. I might not pronounce it right, sorry. Do you have an opinion on the tasajara method for making dough? Did I pronounce it right? Tasajara?
Wow. I don't know what that is. So I don't know if I have any opinions because you are a different kind of baker than I am, and maybe I could learn from you.
I'll unmute myself for this one. The Tasahara bread book was published, I think, in the late 60s by a Buddhist type commune bakery in San Francisco, and it claims to have gotten people to make their own bread again. The method is that you do your first rising as a sponge. That is, you include everything except the salt, the oil, and half of the flour. So it should be gloppy and grow like like something out of a science fiction movie.
Yeah.
And then after, and that first rising, it's supposed to stretch the gluten fibers by itself, so that by the time you get to the next stage, which is putting the rest of the ingredients in, then your kneading is done.
Oh,
That's
so
what I
that's a
like
huge,
about it.
that's amazing, because a lot of people have watched like British baking shows or have read one baking book, and they know there's like a window pane concept, but they have to knead and knead and knead until they can stretch those glutens long enough to be able to look through their dough and know that they have those long strands. So reducing the kneading time is really helpful for a lot of people. I have a KitchenAid stand mixer, and we put all of our breads into the ingredients for our breads into our stand mixer, and it does some of that process for us with the dough hook. So it's not all hand kneading, but some of the hand kneading's a lot of fun. If you've had a frustrating day, ain't nothing better than taking it out on some dough. There was another question. Josh, did you unmute yourself? Did you want to ask me something or tell me something?
Oh, you're very perceptive. You noticed that. I was debating. I was trying to form my question. I have several questions, but I was trying to figure out which would be the best one to ask. I'll just ask one of them. For you personally, as you've developed as a baker, is there something that you found difficult and challenging that others might not have thought appeared so?
Great. Oh, that's a super question. So I think there are some bakes that are highly overrated, even if they're in fashion and everybody wants them and wants them made all the time. And I find reproducing the exact same bake over and over again to be a challenge. You saw with today's tear and share bread, I used what was ready a la minute, like right at this minute, what is growing fresh. And I love the freedom to do that. I would not be your baker if you wanted 2 dozen chocolate chip cookies exactly the same every Tuesday. I find that repetition takes away some of the play and wonder when it all comes together. And frankly, I'm much more interested in the ingredients and the way that they are in concert with each other than standardizing and replicating over and over again. On my food blog, I do have a lot of recipes up. There's some where over time I've gone back in and said, oh, I had a challenge on that. Here's what I'm doing now, and I think it's better. So you're welcome to check those out too. I think we're all on a journey and growing for sure. But simple answer for you is I am not your chocolate chip cookie girl. Also, I don't like chocolate very much. Sorry.
Thank you, Eve, so much. This has been super interesting. Yeah, and for sharing all your knowledge and wisdom about this. Thank you.
Sure. For those of you who are going to be celebrating Shavuot and thinking about what you're cooking for people you care about, I just encourage you to move into the savory side and get out of the super sweet cheesecakes as our only options. Part of the reason I made this Harissa Tear and Share Bread is to help you think a realm of new possibilities. And if anybody wants to drop into the Facebooks later on or in chat some things you're going to be making, especially if they're Shavuot recipes that you're trying for the first time, I'd love to read them.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. I would probably try that too. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We have come to the end of the session as well as the end of our Shavuot Sojourn. If you were inspired by what you heard and would like to help Pearlstone during this time of financial hardship, please consider making a donation at pearlstone.org/donate/donate online. Lastly, if you enjoyed Eve's session, please consider signing up for Motzi, which is the Bread from the Earth network of people freely sharing seeds and resources inspired by ancient Jewish earth-based traditions. So that's where you can also post about Shavuot recipes, for example. And that you can find at pearlstone.org/Motzi. Yeah, so that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.